Welcome back to the 2022 APAICS Tech Summit. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Donald R. Cravens Jr., who was recently sworn in as the first Undersecretary of Commerce for Minority Business Development, where he leads the Minority Business Development Agency, MBDA, in its service of the nation's 9.7 million minority business enterprises. Undersecretary Cravens previously served in the Louisiana legislature, where he represented hundreds of businesses, many minority-owned and located in rural communities. Mr. Cravens also served as staff director and chief counsel for the United States Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, where he played a vital role in the successful passage of the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010. In January 2013, he became the chief of staff to United States Senator Mary L. Landrieu of Louisiana. At that time, he was the only African-American chief of staff in the United States Senate. Since leaving the United States Senate in 2015, Mr. Cravens has served in key executive positions for some of America's largest nonprofit and for-profit corporations, including the National Urban League, where he most recently served as its executive vice president and chief operating officer.
Hi, I'm Don Cravens Jr., Undersecretary for Minority Business Development at the U.S. Department of Commerce. I want to thank the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies for bringing together some of the nation's brightest minds to answer a very critical question. How can we use technology to reach our nation's potential? You know, decade after decade, American innovation continues to lift society to new heights. However, the latest advances are only as useful as their accessibility. When nearly 20 million Americans still do not have reliable internet access, then we know we have some work to do. The days of inaccessibility are not yet behind us, but they should be. We have the tools to give every American access to services, resources, and opportunities from their living rooms. But to do so, we need to meet people where they are. Technology is the key to bridging the divide in order to create a more equitable economy and society. Thankfully, help is on the way. The Minority Business Development Agency, along with our Department of Commerce and Biden administration partners, are helping to close the digital divide for America's 9.7 million minority business enterprises, or MBEs. Between the bipartisan infrastructure law and the American Rescue Plan and the other groundbreaking initiatives, the Biden administration is investing over $90 billion in delivering high-speed internet to every American. The Minority Business Development Agency is ensuring we capitalize on the administration's historic investments by narrowing not only the digital gap, but the opportunity gap between minority and non-minority owned businesses. The greatest barrier facing minority business communities is access. Access to capital, access to contracts, and access to markets. MBDA's mission is to not only expand access to these opportunities, but also to break down the barriers holding minority businesses back. Last year, the MBDA began an evolution. In November of 2021, President Biden signed into law the Minority Business Development Act. The law mandates MBDA's transformation into a pivotal leader for the minority business community. Our authority, our influence, and our reach are now elevated to new heights not seen in MBDA's 53-year history. Critically for me, as a native of rural Louisiana, this expansion mandates our presence in rural communities, not just physically, but virtually as well. For entrepreneurs and businesses not near an urban area or an existing MBDA center, the administration's broadband investments will expand access to our services and ultimately expand opportunities to grow. That's what it's going to take. This is how we create a modern economy that gives every business the tools to reach their potential. We need to meet people where they are. Because we all know giving minority-owned businesses equitable opportunities is not just the right thing to do, it's good for business. Closing the opportunity gap between minority and non-minority businesses would add an estimated $6 trillion to the nation's economy. That's the key. Equity in business is the key to unlocking America's economic potential. And with a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver for the American people, MBDA is ready to get to work. So thank you again to APAICS and all the participants working to advance minority enterprise. Have a great event. Thank you.
Thank you, Undersecretary Cravens, for those remarks. And now for our final panel of the 2022 APAICS Tech Summit. To close us out, we have a panel entitled Exploring How Fintech is Driving Financial Inclusion. This discussion convenes leaders in the financial services community to explore how fintech can be used to drive social equity as it relates to financial inclusion. Moderating this discussion is APAICS Advisory Board member Irene Bueno. With decades of experience working in and with the highest levels of government, Irene has developed extensive high-level relationships across government, including the executive branch, House and Senate Democratic leadership, congressional committees with jurisdiction over health, education, and appropriations issues, and the Tri-Caucus. Welcome, Irene, and our final group of panelists.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the FinTech Financial Inclusion panel. We will discuss how FinTech has the power to transform the way we invest and bank, and whether it can be utilized for social good and driving financial inclusion in marginalized communities. We have an amazing panel today, so let's get started. First, introduce Dholiya, who is a vice president of Rocket Solar. In his 3 years at Rocket Companies, Dhairya has been integral in the redesign of Rocket Loan's unsecured financing platform. Most recently, he has worked with Rocket Solar, which aims to make solar possible for millions of clients by driving a better solar experience, helping them to connect to cleaner, more affordable energy. We're honored to have Mayor Farrah and Khan, who made history in November of 2020, becoming the 23rd mayor of Irvine. She not only received the highest numbers of votes for the position of mayor in the city's history, but also shattered glass ceilings as the first woman of color to hold the position and the first Muslim woman to lead a large city in the United States. Mayor Khan is focused on ensuring that the city of Irvine is a leader throughout Orange County, California, when it comes to innovation and technology, maintaining a healthy environment, combating climate change, and protecting the health and wellness of Irvine diverse communities. We're also joined by Jay Gnazzo, who is a senior policy manager at Blockchain Association. Jay serves as the association's lead on DeFi, DEI, the metaverse, NFTs, and Web3. Additionally, Jay is a resource for association membership on international, state, and local policy issues. Next, we have Rakesh Gopalan, who is a technology and securities lawyer with extensive experience in complex technology and outsourcing deals, public securities issuance, including initial public offerings and public company reporting requirements, private and public company mergers and acquisitions, and other corporate and transactional matters. He is currently co-chair of the firm's fintech practice and formerly co-chair of the firm's institutional banking practice. Rakesh is actively involved in diversity and inclusion efforts with the firm and the legal community, including through his work as a founding member and current board member of the Charlotte Asian Pacific American Bar Association and as chair of the firm's Asian Law Network. And finally, we have Joyce Penisot, who has over 15 years of experience working with the Asian Pacific Islander community development organizations, including several national capacity members in New York, California, and Washington. Most recently, Joyce worked with the Seattle Chinatown International District Preservation and Development Authority as the director of IDA Space, an economic development resource and design center. So we have a really amazing panel and lots to talk about. So I think let's get started and get into it. So my first question is, how have you seen fintech used to drive social equity as it relates to financial inclusion? Mayor Khan, can you kick us off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Irene. And, one of the basics of fintech when it comes to equity is making sure that people have access to it. We want to make sure that not only is accessible, but it's also available in multiple languages, making sure that when people are reaching out for help, that they're able to do so in the most comfortable way that they can. Not only that, but having that diversity of opportunities for them. It's going to be important to know and understand what community you're serving in order to get the right type of programs in that community as well. So I think, when we talk about diversity and equity, when it comes to fintech, it's really making sure that companies understand the community that they're trying to serve, and at the same time for local governments to be able to highlight the needs of that community.
Thank you, Mayor Khan. Jay, would you like to address that question?
Yeah, happy to. So I think first it'd be helpful to kind of level set. So in 2019, the FDIC conducted a study on the percentage of unbanked people in the US. They estimated that 5.4% of all households, so I believe it's around 7 million people, are unbanked. 49% who are unbanked said they don't have enough money to meet minimum bank requirements. 36% do not trust banks. Another 36% state that avoiding a bank gives more privacy. And another third state that bank fees are too high. And so of non-bank financial transaction services, the subsection with the lowest satisfaction rating is actually peer-to-peer payment services, where nearly 40% of those surveyed expressed dissatisfaction with this service. And so I think that kind of segues into blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies and kind of everything that surrounds that. But as kind of an introduction, blockchains, they're an immutable ledger that records the history of all interactions with any information existing on the chain. And the blockchain acts as a non-editable document that records all transactions between participants, ensuring that all information is forever recorded for all to see, which ensures transparency and accountability for all. And so using that technology, in 2009, there's a creation of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network, which is the world's first cryptocurrency in the first use case of a blockchain. And since its inception, Bitcoin has acted as digital cash for millions of users worldwide, and it sparked the creation of thousands of other tokens in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And I think that kind of like the core point of blockchain and crypto is to provide an alternative investment or payment vehicle for those that have been historically disenfranchised by existing traditional financial institutions for a variety of reasons. And according to a 2022 Pew Research poll, those who invested in crypto, 78% say they want a different way to invest. In that same poll, we saw that 20% of Black, Hispanic, or Asian Americans say they have invested in crypto compared to only 13% of white Americans. Truly, the blockchain and crypto network has really struck a chord with these historically disenfranchised communities and has acted as a way for households to build wealth and for millions to transact with an alternative payment system.
Thank you so much, Jay. Dhairya?
Thank you for having me on the panel. Really appreciate the invitation from APAICS, and it's an amazing group of individuals to be with. I think to add to Mayor Khan's and Jay's point, fintech has two specific roles, right? First is to be the foundation to create equal opportunity for high-speed information to actually reach the end clients. And one of the largest challenges we see at Rocket companies, which we have tackled with our products such as the Rocket Mortgage, digital application, Rocket Loans, digital financing, is to reach consumers who do not have typical access to, information easily and digital loan application processes. So one of the things, we are predominantly focused on at Rocket companies is how do we take the entire financial ecosystem and bring it to a platform where almost anyone across the US has access to it. And to Mayor Khan's point, leveraging technology, we can kind of really focus on, serving this information in multiple languages and at different layers, deep diving based on what understanding the end consumer has. So some of the initiatives which Rocket companies has taken to kind of solve this specific problem in Detroit is historically only 40% of Detroit population residents had access to the internet. And by focusing on initiatives such as Connect 313, which allows us to encourage neighborhood internet access, we have increased the adoption to almost 67.5% in the last 3 years this program has specifically been alive. Apart from that, even our neighbor to neighbor program is another great highlight where we specifically use technology to target residents who can go door to door and educate Detroit residents on the tax breaks that are available to them, on the home incentive programs which are available to encourage home ownership. And I think, to Jay's point, blockchain is a great example of doing this on a more global level. But I think even more grassroots level efforts to kind of encourage more community participation and awareness of financial products available digitally to consumers is something which Rocket has been predominantly focused on, and we intend to do that with Rocket Solar as well when it comes to our solar, to increase solar adoption across the US.
Thank you so much. So the next question is, what are the challenges that still exist in the fintech ecosystems that prevent more widespread participation from the most underrepresented communities? Joyce, can I start off with you?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So I think what I'll speak from is really more the perspective of underrepresented and low and moderate income Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, because that's really sort of the experience of our organization and our area of expertise. So I really see that there's 4 main barriers for accessing some of the opportunity that exists through some of the fintech that exists currently. One of them is language access. Low and moderate income AAPI communities are largely immigrant and refugee populations. And what we see with a lot of the fintech is that it is not accessible in multiple Asian languages. As many of us know, the API community is extremely diverse with dozens of languages, and the most vulnerable in our community are often not proficient in English and aren't able to use the app in Spanish. And so in many ways, sometimes the technology just isn't able to really reach out to those in our communities in the diverse ways that we need. I think the second thing that we're seeing is that our communities really still need to build trust, right? Trust with the technology and trust with the financial systems. Many, again, going back to low and moderate income immigrant and refugee communities, they know almost nothing about the US financial system. So how can we expect them to kind of enter into a digital space where they don't necessarily have those relationships or understand, where is my money going? A third and very basic thing is just around technology access. It's whether or not they have high-speed internet or smartphones. Many of the most vulnerable in our communities are struggling to be able to have that technology that they need to function in their everyday lives. And we saw this very, very clearly during the pandemic and continues to be a challenge today. This fourth thing kind of undergirds all of this, right? Which is that we just simply don't have enough good information about the diversity of our community here in the API community, right? Without appropriate data disaggregation and really the sort of details that we need to really understand who is a vulnerable community, how are they accessing, who do they trust, where are they turning? We just don't have enough information to really shape the tools that really reach those who need it the most.
Thank you, Joyce. Rakesh, can you answer the same question?
Yes, thanks again for having me. I think the one thing from a legal regulatory standpoint that I would add is, data is king, as we know. But there are a number of factors related to the use of data. And, in some industries, there are restrictions on what data you can collect, demographic data, things of that nature, or additional requirements based on whether you collect that data. So carefully analyzing what information you're collecting, what you want to do, what you want to collect, and what you want to do with it is really important. And so it might sound self-serving, but looping in your legal and compliance professionals early and often is quite helpful as you roll out and think about, either product development or product usage on the fintech end. And then once data is collected, we would all hope that it's used for good. But as we all know, there are bad actors out there, or at least those that operate within the gray. And sometimes there is no black or white to some of these usage rules or morals or whatever you call them. And so it's really important to be thinking about, is the data that we're collecting going to be used for fintech products that are actually going to help the landscape or just perpetuate inequities? Thank
you. Jay?
Yeah, just to briefly add on to those points, really going from Joyce and talking about accessibility, I think that on that note, just the exposure to fintech and the alternatives within the space to traditional banking system or any applications, there's no single like encyclopedia that somebody could look at and figure out what all the alternatives are. I think that the ones that people tend to hear about are the ones that you see ads or on TV or hear from a friend, but that's only showing a very limited scope of all the alternatives and innovations that have existed in the fintech world. And I think that that's a really important hurdle to get over in order for the system really to work for everybody. And then just on top of that, even if you know all of the alternatives, hypothetically, there's still a level of technical literacy and education that is very hard to achieve. It not only in underrepresented communities, but in all communities in general. Tech is evolving and growing so fast that it takes an enormous amount of time and effort and understanding in order to access these applications and innovations that are supposed to be working for everybody. And in the most underrepresented communities that have been historically disenfranchised, that only compounds on top of language barriers and everything else that was previously mentioned. So I think that that's a really important point, the technical literacy and education that needs to be done to overcome these challenges.
Well, I think you laid out a lot of challenges and addressed some of the things that need to be addressed. But what are your organizations doing to address some of these challenges? Start off with Dhairya.
I think that Jay's and Rakesh's point sets me up really well to kind of highlight this, right? One of the things which predominantly the role of fintech has been is to help the underbanked and the unbanked population get access to these tools. And as Rakesh said, data is the new powerful tool which is at the disposal of all the fintech companies. I think when it comes to compliance and regulation, we need to do a better job trying to understand the regulation and ensure that the data is fairly and equitably used to kind of create fair decisions. At the same time, it is our duty as these large fintech players in the space to, really bring this innovation and, these machine learning models, these artificial intelligence systems, which can create personalized decisions to the benefit of the end consumer. So I think, working with the regulators, explaining them our practices, our technology, and how we are really leveraging that to increase, financial inclusion is key to us being able to even, adopt these technologies on a wider scale and truly bring, innovation to the forefront. Now, when it comes to specifically solar, right? Solar is one of the more recent industries I would like to say it, right? It has really gone through a lot of transformation and the information is all over the place. End consumer doesn't really know what exactly is being sold, what exactly he's paying, what is he paying for. And at Rocket Solar, our mission is to simplify that, right? From, bringing tools which can be at their disposal in terms of evaluating their solar projects, what kind of financing is available, guiding the client to ensure he gets what's best for them, and doing this on a national scale. So I think both, partnership with regulators as well as partnership with public authorities to kind of get a little more deeper into the credit decisions, get a little more deeper into the credit worthiness spectrum, and see who can be qualified for better products. Leveraging the machine learning and data infrastructure large companies have is key to kind of increasing financial inclusion adoption across the US and in underrepresented communities.
Thank you. Mayor Khan.
So one of the things that we at the local government can do is we're in touch with our community on a daily basis. So one of the programs that we initiated in the city of Irvine is called One Irvine. And we did that based off of the idea that a lot of people were not getting access to the resources or the money that they needed to upgrade their older homes. So we took a neighborhood of homes that were basically built in 1975 or earlier and decided to create our own program. And this was really either a grant or a no interest loan for them to upgrade their homes to energy efficient appliances, whether they wanted to put solar on, whether they wanted to change out their lights, even as far as changing out their lawns from grass to more drought resistant plants. And really what we learned from there was that people want to upgrade their homes. They want to build these changes that make them more environmentally sustainable, but they don't know where to go. And so that disconnect is seen all the time. And so what we are really hoping to do is meet the companies, the players that are out there in fintech, and have them come in and share what they're able to offer our community members to really get the word out that, one, what's out there for folks. Second, what what kind of accessibility is there for them? Are they local? Are they not local? Are they, again, that language portion is so important, because if they're not able to communicate with you, they're not able to share what their needs are. And so really it's about making those connections happen, making sure that they're educated as well. Before they're going to take any step towards financial movements, they're going to need to be educated. And I think we need our fintech partners to be able to step up and provide that education portion as well.
Joyce?
I think just building on that, I really do think that education is a key piece of what we can be doing to really address some of the challenges. National Capacity is both an intermediary and a national policy advocacy organization. And we are doing a lot of education at both the sort of local level and the national level, right? At the local level, our member organizations across the country are educating local community members on, what is fintech? What is the US financial system? How can you trust, these different resources that are available? And then at the national level, our organization is working with elected officials, federal agencies, helping them to better understand the AAPI community, and in particular, the limited English proficient and LMI AAPI communities, because their needs are often misunderstood or disguised by the fact that our data isn't disaggregated. And so as an organization, I think we're often trying to provide that sort of education that's really critical for shifting the narrative about the needs of those most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you, Joyce. And Dhairya, I think you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think to Mayor Khan's point, I think the public sector and government partnerships can go a long way, right? Fintech companies such as Rocket have access to the consumer, and consumers reach out to us all the time for different products. Us being able to better understand, local initiatives and incentives available, and state level incentives, federal incentives, and being able to better educate the client on where should they go, what should they look for, and how can they qualify for these grants, these aids, the zero interest loans, is a huge play. And one of the things Rocket is specifically doing in this space is we are creating an extensive database in the solar space of all the local incentives and initiatives available, which a client could be eligible for, and helping the client in an automated fashion understand and qualify for these, and kind of know and educate them on which forms they should fill out, which offices they should go to. But I think there's definitely an opportunity for better public, private, and government partnership to kind of and nonprofits to kind of better educate the clients on what's exactly available to them, because the challenge is usually not that the lawmakers are behind or that the fintechs are behind. It's the fact that education to the consumer is really behind in terms of what they are aware about and what they aren't. So I think that this is definitely a good opportunity for us to jointly collaborate and solve a larger problem out there.
Thank you so much. Okay, so our next question, what are some insights, lessons learned, and future opportunities regarding new approaches to driving financial inclusion? Rakesh, let's start with you.
I'll sort of just continue on the same theme of being responsible in how we use the information. But another point that we had mentioned related to either the use of information or really even a broader point is, does everybody know what this technology is capable of? And so it's one thing to bring lawyers and compliance personnel in early, like I mentioned, but it's also, this is changing so often that everyone is behind almost, except the people who are creating the technology. And so particularly in terms of the regulations, all of this innovation is happening at a time when all of the regulators are trying to fit a round peg in a square hole, right? And it is not or square peg in a round. And what's happening is that there are these often antiquated rules that they're trying to interpret to fit the current need. And the current need is actually already behind because the technology has even evolved. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that a lot of these regulators feel like they need to be in this space, and they probably should in some way. But then it's just a battle of alphabet soup of regulators saying, oh, well, that touches my area in this way, sort of. And so everything is, there's a lot of overlapping regulation, and there's a lot of lack of understanding. And yes, the overall macro solution is pass laws and make it clear. But that takes time. And there's a lot, everything that's involved in politics to make a law happen. So what do we do in the meantime? And I think this theme of education that we're talking about is really, really important. It's education to the consumer, education to the business, education to the C-suite, education to and from the legal community. And I think that is something that we have to really be thinking about while this train is moving at light speed.
Thank you. Joyce, would you like to comment on this question?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I think I really would just build on it by saying, I think that the education is really key to building trust, right? And all of us wouldn't trust our finances to just anybody, right? We would be foolish if we did. And so the way that we build trust is by really investing in that education. And sometimes investing in that education means investing in people that you trust in your local community. And that's really what we're seeing from our national network, right? Is that by investing in community-based organizations who can serve as navigators and in some ways interpreters, not just language interpreters, but cultural interpreters of like, what does this mean for me to be engaging in this type of fintech? Many members of our network do financial coaching and financial education. And they are for many low and moderate income immigrant and refugee groups, some of the first people that they interface with to actually understand the US financial system. And so I think this is not super innovative, but the more that we can invest in folks who can serve as those navigators is actually really key to building that trust in, not just the technology, but the underlying system in which that technology is trying to connect people to.
Thank you, Joyce. Dhairya?
I think, I'm going to reiterate the point, and, it might sound like a beaten horse, but, education is the key, right? When it comes to driving financial inclusion, ensuring that firstly, access to the tools, access to the internet is key, right? You to really get online, you need a platform to be able to get online. But programs like the neighbor to neighbor or local initiatives where there is a trusted source you could go to learn, educate, understand, to call a number which can be a trusted company like Rocket and be like, hey, what can I do in this situation? And for companies to think beyond, like, just in place of selling your product or encouraging, how do we encourage education and ensure that the consumer understands how a credit decision could impact their financial health, how a buying decision could impact their financial health, is key to really kind of opening the doors to financial inclusion. And in terms of leveraging the existing technology better, I think while I love to say that coming from the product data and engineering world, that machine learning and artificial intelligence and neural networks are the key and solution, they really are tools which can only be leveraged if they are structured in the right way. And to get them to structure in the right way, partnering with the regulators, partnering with the lawmakers, partnering with the ground organizations which are going to actually leverage these tools is really important, so that they know how this technology is working to really empower the end consumer. So at Rocket, one of the things we really take pride and ownership is in being available to every client every time. And we have no exceptions or excuses to this. Our goal is that we really educate the client on what is the best decision for them, and doing that on a larger scale and more companies kind of being part of that narrative will go a long way in actually opening up doors to leveraging some of this more advanced technology and actually improving what's out there right now.
Thank you so much. So the final question, and we might have time for some closing statements, but so I just want to give you that heads up. But the final question I have for some of you are, how can government and the private sector come together to better support these opportunities? Rakesh, I'll start off with you.
So a couple of things come to mind here. I think first is that we need more of us. and I think that what I mean that is the APA community writ large. We need more of us in different areas and cross collaboration. I think that's what we, in every sector, we talk about the power of diversity is bringing these different perspectives to the table. So we're all thinking of different things for our different communities, where our parents grew up, or, where we live, et cetera. So we need more of that. And, rather than just your traditional sort of roles. And the other thing that comes to mind is that we need younger people involved in government, and we need more people in government back in the private sector. And so that cross collaboration is really helpful. We've had at our firm, we've had several former regulators that have joined our firm, and they have told us all the good things and the bad things about how the regulators are trying to grapple with these issues of equity and of the usage of fintech products. But the reverse is also true, that we can't always have the same cookie cutter version of a politician at the highest levels or at any level really, and certainly not those that look like us and that are different. And so having more Mayor Khans out there and having that kind of cross collaboration or tunnel back and forth between the government and private sector, I think for me is a really important thing.
Thank you. So Jay, the same question about how the government and the private sector to come together.
Yeah, and very similar answer to Rakesh. I think that we've talked about education this entire time, but I think it's really about building and constructing the relationships between industry and people in the government to not be talking at each other, but with each other to build smart regulation or to build some type of further relationship. Like emerging technologies, everyone understands that it really is within their best interest to have smart regulation to protect their consumers in the industry itself. But regulation really must be derived from engagement between the consumers, the private sector, and the government to ensure that the regulations are workable and address the areas that expose the greatest amount of risk, that it's really addressing those areas in that the regulations are workable and are things that are going to be successful, not just for the next iteration of a technology, but really setting up the stage for future innovation and growth. And I think that speaking a little bit on blockchain, I think we've seen in a lot of state level governments and even around the world that there's been a lot of bills dedicated to creating working groups that are just studying blockchain technology and its implications and really figuring out what the future is and how blockchain, the technology, can work as an asset to the government or for the people and where all these areas exist. And that only happens if the innovators and the people who truly understand the technology are having daily conversations with regulators who have a million things on their plate so that everything can be dealt with and this innovation really can exist and work for the people.
Thank you, Jay. Mayor Khan?
Well, I loved what Rakesh said, of diversifying these roles. But I think, from the government perspective, I would just like to say that, we're not experts in all these different fields that we're having to make decisions on. And so it's important for us to know who to reach out to get our education, to understand what we're dealing with, what's at hand, and to know that those private-public partnerships really mean something. Because at the end of the day, whether you're in the private sector or in the public sector, the goal is really to be out there for the community, to improve their quality of life, to make sure that they're getting the best in technology that they can get. But at the end of the day, if you're not able to have those conversations, if you're not able to learn and progress, then really you're not doing the job. If I'm just going to sit here and fight with the private sector and tell them that, you don't understand my community, but if I don't even make that effort of going out to them and sitting down with them and having those conversations on, hey, this is what my community looks like, this is their need, what can you do? And I think those conversations are important, not only in fintech, but just about in every aspect of life. So we need to be more open. We definitely, and I love the idea of having younger representation in government, because really the higher up you go, you lose that. You lose the youthfulness, you lose the diversity, and there's not really much out there. So it's important for us to know that people from the industry are stepping up into public roles and that they are reaching out to their public and private partners to get the resources needed to bring back into their communities.
Thank you so much, Mayor Khan. I know we could probably talk about this forever, but we only have a limited amount of time. So before we close, I'm just going to ask if you'd like to make some closing remarks before we conclude this panel. So let me start off with Dhairya first. Dhairya?
Yeah, I think, the panel did a great job. I'll just summarize. I think educating the client, collaborating with the policymakers and the policymakers, collaborating with technologies like us to, really understand, what's out there and how it can benefit the end consumer. is key. And I think lastly, for companies such as Rocket and every other large company which is playing in the fintech space, think of the consumer's best interest and design products which can really truly help them navigate the difficult financial circumstances one goes through, right, in life. So I think we need more such panels, to be honest, where policymakers and technologists and lawyers and even blockchain enthusiasts as well as non-profit personnel all come together and discuss these challenges and create platforms which basically are inclusive of every community and really encourage financial inclusion across different walks of life. So long story short, I think we just need more of these to kind of get the word out there.
Thank you so much. Rakesh?
Yeah, I think we should just, one of the things that I think we all should bear in mind, and fintech companies in particular, is that there is no one prototypical customer, and there shouldn't be. And so tapping into really understanding how we're different and why we're different is very important. And so obviously companies have to make money, and that's important, and that drives business and jobs and everything. But a component of what I think everyone should do in our respective spaces is making sure that we do think about the underserved, whether or not it is a direct benefit to the bottom line. So, lawyers, we do that in the pro bono space, and companies, a lot of companies do a very good job at corporate social responsibility in that they give money and they donate and have foundations. But what about more about using the actual product itself to enhance that? And I know, Dhairya, you mentioned that in terms of Rocket's efforts. But if more companies would have that mindset, eventually it might end up being profitable. But if they have the mindset that that is an important goal in and of itself, and it's probably the best bang for their buck, so to speak, to use their product for good, or at least a component of it, or have outreach efforts in that respect, in addition to or separate from the sort of corporate foundation kind of work.
Thank you, Rakesh. And Jay?
Yeah, just wanted to add very quickly. I think that kind of to Dhairya's point about having panels and having these conversations, it doesn't have to be in the form of a panel. It doesn't have to be any official form, but just these conversations that we're having, it's helping me learn more about different components of the people that we are really trying to serve and make sure that they're included in the financial system through the inventions that come out of fintech. And I think that having these discussions in hearing from everybody, I think that that's not common enough, where it's across industry, where it's across between public and private. That constantly has to be something that we strive to do, is just continue to build these relationships and have these conversations so that the people that are really innovating in the fintech space can address these things and work to empower the people and work for the people, rather than have a technology developed and then alter it after the fact to mainly represent people. Have it really come and be created for the people and by the people.
Thank you so much, Jay. Well, I want to thank all the panelists for taking the time to be on this panel today. I think it was really interesting and informative, and hopefully these kinds of opportunities will continue to flourish as this technology moves forward. I want to also thank APAICS for holding this session, and for the audience for tuning in today. So thank you all so much, and hope you have a great day.